We talked earlier about hemp. Let us talk now about marijuana. Voters in Oklahoma this summer approved the use of medical marijuana. Do you think Kansas should legislate the use of medical marijuana, and should it explore legalizing recreational marijuana as a new revenue source for the state?
Yeah, you know, I've been pretty clear on this policy from the beginning. I believe any doctor who's legally entitled to prescribe a Schedule II narcotic should be entitled to prescribe medical marijuana. I have actually traveled recently to Colorado to meet a young Kansas family that literally had to flee the state because they had a child who was having up to 200 seizures a day, and it could only be treated with medical marijuana. I visited him a couple of weeks ago. He had gone from 200 seizures a day to being seizure-free for 21 weeks. His mother said, "I've got my little boy back." And she was, in November of last year, afraid that her son wasn't going to see his next birthday. And so I think we absolutely need to do it. There are a number of conditions where it's actually the preferred protocol, and we shouldn't have our most vulnerable citizens, those suffering with diseases, feeling like refugees or feeling like they're breaking a law, feeling like criminals just because they want to get a little relief. As it relates to recreational use, you know, I think we spend a whole lot of criminal justice resources arresting, booking, confining, trying, incarcerating a teenager for having a dime bag of weed. I believe we should change that and make it a citable offense. If you're caught with recreational quantities of marijuana, I think we should treat it just like a speeding ticket, give you a citation, let you go on your way. I also believe that it's an issue of social justice. You know, young African American kids are just as likely as Caucasian kids to use marijuana, and yet they're 7 times more likely to be arrested and jailed. And so I do believe we need to legalize medical marijuana, and I've seen the real personal effects of that, and then believe as it relates to recreational use, we need to take that in a very different direction.
Senator.
You know, the little boy that Greg is referencing actually came into committee. We had a hearing on, it was CBD oils 2 years ago. Representative from Lawrence, John Wilson, had that bill and tried to get it passed. It did not pass, and it was heartbreaking because we did see the impact of that. Things have changed even in that short period of time. Now our medical community has moved over from being adamantly opposed to legalizing medical marijuana to considering it and recognizing the value of it. So I think we have an opportunity as we move into the next session to have those discussions and perhaps actually be able to pass it and take care of this issue once and for all. I think it's important. I would clearly sign a bill that does it. We'll do it in Kansas style. It'll be well regulated and controlled, but we need to do it. There are so many people for whom this would be good, including our opioid users. This would be a great boon to them. So yeah, we'll do that. Now when it comes to recreational marijuana, I believe also that we really need to address our sentencing guidelines. I do think it's absurd that we are throwing people behind bars for a nonviolent offense. It's not only bad for them and their families, it's costly to the state. You know, we're talking about building new prisons or adding prison beds. We don't need to do that. What we need to do is to look at these sentencing guidelines and get some of these folks out of our prisons. You know, if they need treatment, fine. We ought to be establishing those kinds of addiction programs. But having them incarcerated makes absolutely no sense. We probably just make more criminals by doing it that way. So we do need to change that system. To go to full-blown recreational marijuana being legal in the state, I got to tell you, I've been in the legislature long enough, and the legislature's not caught up to that yet. It won't happen in the next couple of years, I can guarantee that. It's going to take a groundswell of the public coming and saying, this is what we want. We've seen this happen with Medicaid. You know, several years ago, the general public was not out there. They are now, and we're seeing the legislature act. We need to do the same sort of grassroots effort if we really want to ever see recreational marijuana legalized here. But I also want to caution people, you know, the idea that this is going to fund our schools, you know, or be our financial panacea, it will not. We know already from the studies that have been done, you know, as more states legalize it, you know, the profit goes down and they see less return. So I don't, if we do it, we should do it because it's the right thing to do, not because we think it's going to settle our budget problems.
All right. We're rapidly running out of time, Dina, so the pressure is now on to get our last question with
That's
where we can get succinct answers from our candidates.
Oh, okay. One more quick one. I don't know, this will be quick. Briefly explain your own views about gun ownership and gun control as they relate to policies in Kansas and, for example, campus carry.
Senator.
Is me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know, I think everybody in this room knows that I've always been a strong supporter of the Second Amendment rights. I believe that law-abiding citizens ought to have a right to own guns for their own safety. I believe they have the right to hunt. But as we look at things like campus safety and whatever else, a couple of years ago, I voted to ban guns on campus. It did not pass. Last year, we voted to ban guns in public hospitals like KU, also community mental health centers and public adult care homes. It did pass. They're banned there. This past year, I voted for a bill that will take guns out of the hands of people convicted of domestic violence violations. So we're moving in the right direction. We had a number of other common sense amendments that were put forth. We did vote on banning guns on campus again. Didn't pass, but this time it came to a 20-20 vote. Dies on a tie. But that's how close we're getting. That's how attitudes are changing. And you can all thank Moms Demand Action and the Parkland students. So when I'm governor, what I will do is I will bring together the stakeholders in this, law enforcement, our mental health professionals, our public health professionals, our educators, our parents, and some of our students, and we will craft a common sense gun policy that I will then use the office of governor to push forward in the legislature as much as we possibly can and move Kansas back to a place that makes it a safe place for our families and our kids.
Mr. Orman.
This is actually an issue that I've talked extensively about and written extensively about. I am a gun owner. I do believe that people in America have the right to keep and bear arms consistent with our Constitution. But I also believe in sensible firearm regulations. It's probably the reason the NRA spent $1.5 million attacking me in 2014. And so what do I believe in that regard? I believe first we need to close the loopholes in our background check system, and we need to eliminate the private sale loophole. I think the idea, you know, background checks catch people who have primarily either been sentenced to more than a year in jail, are subject to a domestic abuse restraining order, have been judged to be mentally ill, or alternatively dishonorably discharged from the military. I got to tell you, I don't want those people owning guns. So first and foremost, we need to close those loopholes, the private sale loophole and the reporting issues. The second thing I believe we should do is we should ban bump stocks, high-capacity magazines, anything that turns a semi-automatic rifle into a weapon of mass murder. And I think that's absolutely sensible. Finally, we've got to look at our constitutional carry law in Kansas. You know, in Kansas, it requires 1,000 hours of training to legally wax an eyebrow, and yet anybody can carry a concealed weapon without a minute's worth of training. That's absolutely ridiculous to me. That's absolutely ridiculous to me. And by the way, on all of those areas, I think the vast majority of Kansas gun owners agree with me on all of those policies. They've taught their children firearm safety. They've taught concealed carry classes before this time. They ultimately realize the power of firearms and the need to have reasonable firearm safety measures.
All right. I have bad news for all of the people who wrote questions, which is that we are over time. I think I have probably failed my job as moderator in that regard. So let me do this as we bring our evening to a close. First, let's thank again the Women for Kansas folks who put on this event. I want to give a big round of applause to our journalists who asked the questions tonight. Thank you all very much. And we should give a very big round of applause to our earlier candidate, Brian McClendon, and our two gubernatorial candidates tonight. I would hate to speak on their behalf, but I bet they'll stick around a few extra minutes and answer some questions. I think that's what they want to do. Let me say this before we leave here tonight. I just want to thank you all for coming tonight, for participating in this entire convention, and for sticking around to watch the candidates talk tonight. I can assure you that the single most effective way to get out the vote is when you talk to others. Regular interaction with your neighbors and your friends and all the people you come into contact, that person-to-person contact is the best way to get people to go out to the polls. You're going to get a bunch of calls. You're going to get some mailers. But the best way to get people out there is if you go tell them to go vote. So use the information you got tonight, which I think was tremendous, and then get you and your friends out to the polls in November. Thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Can we at least say good night, Irene?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Start. Hey, thanks, Greg. Good to see you again.
Very good. Good to see you again.